I never expected that cleaning out my father's old study would lead me to the most shocking discovery of my life. The house was silent, except for the steady tapping of rain against the grimy windows, casting shadowy, wavering shapes across the dusty floorboards. The air smelled of aged paper, mothballs, and the faint mustiness of years long gone. It was a gloomy afternoon, just a week before my 55th birthday, and the gray skies pressed heavily against the walls, as if warning me of what was to come. I knelt among piles of forgotten memories, boxes full of brittle photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings, and worn-out books with cracked spines. My fingers brushed off a thick layer of dust from one of the old volumes, careful not to tear its fragile pages. When I slipped the cover open, my eyes caught something out of place, a neatly folded letter, yellowed and delicate, hidden within the confines of the book as if deliberately concealed. My breath hitched. The trembling in my hands wasn't from the cold, but from the inexplicable rush of dread and curiosity swirling inside me. It wasn't addressed to me, which only deepened the mystery. Gently, I unfolded the paper, the dry crispness cracking beneath my touch, releasing a faint scent of must and ink soaked into its fibers. As I read the words, a cold wave of shock rolled through me, freezing every part of my body. That letter wasn't just any letter. It was a confession, a secret my father had kept buried all these years, right under my nose. The dim light of the study flickered slightly as thunder rumbled distantly, and the rain intensified, drumming a nervous rhythm against the panes. My breath hitched again, heart rate quickening as my eyes darted back and forth across the page. What was this secret? Why had my father hidden it so carefully? For decades, he lived quietly, a man who never shared much, stoic, distant, a shadow in my life. Yet now, here lay an agonizing truth he refused to voice aloud. The words cut through me like shards of glass, leaving wounds that stung with disbelief and betrayal. I felt the walls of the room closing in, claustrophobic and suffocating, as though the house itself was holding its breath. The storm outside was nothing compared to the turmoil raging inside me. I pressed my forehead against the worn-out desk for a moment, tasting the bitterness of unshed tears, overwhelmed by the weight of an unspoken past clawing its way to the surface. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. The shadows cast by moonlight twisted into haunting shapes on the ceiling as my mind replayed every sentence of the letter, unraveling every tangled thread of my father's silent life. I couldn't yet bring myself to share this grim discovery with Carlos, my husband, my anchor in life. Fear gripped me, not just of what the secret revealed, but of how it might fracture the fragile peace in our family. Would this truth change what we knew? Would it betray everything we believed about my father, about myself? As the hours crawled by and the storm finally subsided, the letter remained folded beside my bed, a silent yet unbearable weight. I knew that tomorrow I would have to reveal it to Carlos, to face the unknown together. But that night, I was trapped in the loneliness of fear and uncertainty, the beginning of a journey I never wished to take, one that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my past. Carlos has been my rock for over 30 years, my husband, my best friend. The way he steadied me through every high and low in life felt like an anchor in a sea that often threatened to drown me. When I finally mustered the courage to show him the letter, the atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. We sat together on the worn-out couch, the dim glow of the single lamp casting long shadows that seemed to flicker with the unrest between us. The letter lay open on my lap, its fragile pages trembling slightly as my fingers clutched them. Carlos was silent for what felt like hours, though in reality it was only a long, heavy pause. His usually steady eyes were clouded with concern. He wasn't just thinking about the words I'd read. He was feeling the tremors those words ignited deep inside me. He knew better than anyone how fragile my sense of security had become in the last few days, how the letter was cracking the foundation of everything I thought I understood about my family, about my father. Our relationship with my father was never easy. He was a man carved out of silence, proud, unyielding, and distant as the cold walls of the old study where I'd found the letter. He never shared his fears or regrets. His emotions were locked away like a fortress behind his stern facade. Over the years, I had convinced myself I knew all the pieces of my past, the hardships he endured, the quiet sacrifices he made. But now, this letter suggested there were dark, hidden corners I was never meant to see. secrets carefully buried in shadows. Carlos reached out and gently squeezed my hand, his touch grounding me amidst the swirl of fear and doubt clouding my mind. His voice was low, calm, and steady, words I needed to hear, even if they offered no immediate relief. Whatever it is, Zilda, we'll figure it out together. Yet, even with Carlos sitting beside me, their quiet strength wrapping around me like a shield, I felt the weight of this unknown truth pressing down on both of us. It was like a silent storm gathering just beneath the surface, quiet now, but threatening to explode at any moment. The air between us was thick with unspoken questions, fears of how deep this secret might run, and what it could destroy or reveal. I looked over at Carlos and saw his jaw tightening, the subtle tension in his posture betraying the calm he tried to project. If he could feel this heavy burden, how could I possibly carry it alone? At that moment, I understood that this wasn't just my secret anymore. It was ours. And together, we could face whatever darkness the letter had unleashed. Still, no matter how much I leaned on him, a cold, creeping sense of dread crawled under my skin, whispering that the truth would not be easy nor safe. I swallowed hard, bracing myself for the journey ahead, knowing the past wasn't done with me yet. Reading the letter again, the dim light of the living room casting a flickering glow, I found myself digging deeper into the cryptic words my father had left behind. His handwriting, uneven and trembling in some spots, spoke of a betrayal, a wound that had festered beneath the surface of our family for years. The letter hinted at a secret so painful, so close to home, that he had carried the weight alone, desperately wishing he could undo the damage, but knowing it was impossible. Every sentence felt like a puzzle piece slowly coming together, but the full picture was still blurred. My thoughts spiraled uncontrollably. Betrayal? Pain? Family? Was he talking about my mother? The woman who had held our family together with quiet strength, but sometimes wore a sadness in her eyes that I never fully understood? Or was the secret tied to someone else, someone I hadn't even known existed? The idea made my chest tighten, my breath shallow with anxiety. Why had he hidden the letter in such an obscure place, inside an old, forgotten book in the back of his study? It was as if he wanted me to find it, but only when I was ready to face the unimaginable. Carlos sat beside me, his presence a steadying force as I voiced my fears in hushed tones. With his gentle encouragement, I realized I couldn't carry this burden alone anymore. I had to confront my mother, to look her in the eyes and seek answers no matter how painful. The next afternoon, the house felt colder than usual, the weight of what was to come hanging heavily in the stagnant air. The faint ticking of the clock echoed like a countdown toward an inevitable collapse. As I sat across from my mother, I searched her face for any hint of the truth. At first, she clung to denial, her voice trembling but firm as she dismissed the letter and its implications. Yet beneath the protests, I caught flickers of something far darker. Faint tremors in her hands, a flicker of sorrow in her eyes, a hesitation that spoke louder than words. When the conversation ended, the silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel the shadows gathering, wrapping tighter around my chest and whispering doubts that gnawed at my resolve. That night, alone in the dark stillness of my bedroom, I lay awake with the ceiling fan humming quietly above me. I replayed every moment of my childhood in agonizing detail. The unspoken tensions, the awkward silences during family dinners, the furtive glances exchanged between my parents, everything now reframed in the harsh light of suspicion and fear. I could almost see the pain behind my father's eyes, the invisible grief he carried like a shroud, and I realized the secret was unraveling like a slow-burning fire threatening to consume everything I ever believed. Despite the overwhelming sadness and the creeping sense of dread tightening its grip, I felt a strange determination rise within me. I wasn't ready to surrender to the darkness, to let this hidden truth define or destroy me. The more I uncovered, the more I understood that facing this shadow meant confronting the past fully, and that I might find something more terrifying in my family's history than I had ever dared to imagine. But I was ready, or at least, I knew I had no choice but to be. Finally, one heavy evening as the sky darkened outside and the wind howled softly through the cracked window panes, Carlos gently urged me to read the letter aloud. The old paper felt fragile between my fingers, its edges curled and soft from years of concealment. The lamp cast a warm, flickering light that barely held back the heavy shadows crowding the corners of the room, mirroring the storm raging silently inside me. I took a deep, steadying breath, my voice trembling as I began reciting the words my father had painstakingly penned so long ago. With every sentence, the weight of his confession pressed down on me deeper, raw, undeniable, and suffocating. He revealed a secret that had haunted him like a phantom for decades, a truth so profound it shattered the fragile illusion I had built around my family's history. The letter revealed that before I was born, my father had faced an impossible choice, one that changed the course of our lives forever. It was about a woman I had never known, my birth mother, a shadowy figure who existed only in the crinkled lines of that letter. He had made a decision to abandon a child he had with her, my half-sibling, someone I had never even imagined existed. This person was deliberately hidden from me, concealed behind walls of silence and shame, so that our family could be spared from scandal. As his words hung in the air, my mind spiraled into a chaos of emotions: shock, grief, anger, and a hollow, aching sense of betrayal. I sat frozen, my body numb yet overwhelmed, confronted by a truth too heavy to carry alone. The years of unanswered questions suddenly fit together like jagged shards of a fragmented mirror, reflecting a distorted but clearer image of the past. Carlos moved closer and gathered me into his arms, his warm embrace cutting through the cold despair enveloping me. I could feel his heartbeat steadying mine, a quiet anchor amid the tempest of emotions crashing within. As the tears I had stifled so long finally spilled down my cheeks, I realized this revelation was far more than just a story from the past. It was a turning point that demanded I rethink everything I believed about my family, my father, and even myself. The room seemed to close in, the shadows growing darker, yet Carlos's presence was a fragile light flickering in the darkness. In that moment, I understood that this secret I had uncovered was no longer merely a hidden chapter locked away in an old study. It was a living truth that would shape how I moved forward, how I healed, and how I reconciled the fractured pieces of my identity. My father's confession wasn't just a memory. It was a call to face the silence that had defined my life for far too long. And as I sobbed into Carlos's embrace, I knew the path ahead would be harsh and uncertain, but I was no longer alone in facing it. Now, weeks have passed since that stormy night when the letter's truth crashed into my world, and still, the weight of it lingers in every quiet moment. I find myself sitting by the window more often, watching the shifting shadows of the trees outside, trying to make sense of what this revelation means, not just for me, but for Carlos, for my family, and for the fragile threads that hold us together. The room is often bathed in the soft glow of dusk, the fading light matching the delicate balance between hope and uncertainty that fills my heart. The letter changed everything. It peeled back the carefully constructed layers of my life and revealed the raw, aching core of a family fractured by silence and secrets. Yet, paradoxically, it also gave me answers I didn't even realize I was searching for. The missing pieces that had haunted me for years now flicker in my mind, clearer, but still tangled in pain. Somehow, amidst this turmoil, I feel a tentative hope growing, a belief that by facing this dark truth head-on, I might begin to heal parts of myself long swallowed by shadows. I've taken my first cautious steps toward connecting with my half-sibling, though each word I type on the screen carries the weight of both hope and fear tangled within my chest. There is so much I want to say, yet so many uncertainties cloud what this new relationship might become. Writing feels like opening a door to a room both familiar and strange, a place where healing might begin or old wounds might deepen. Carlos has been there through it all, the steady presence that calms the storm inside me. His quiet strength reminds me daily that love, messy and imperfect as it is what helps us survive even the darkest nights. Some nights, when the house is silent and the wind whistles against the walls, I think about the lessons that letter brought with it. It taught me that sometimes the most painful secrets are the ones holding the keys to understanding who we truly are. They are the fractured mirrors reflecting the hidden parts of ourselves waiting to be acknowledged. I've come to realize that the silence that once felt suffocating is now becoming the space where forgiveness might finally take root, even decades after the truth was buried deep, waiting patiently to be unearthed. This journey hasn't been easy, and I know there will be days ahead when the shadows will creep back in, when the questions will feel endless and the scars fresh. But I am learning to carry this truth with grace, to let the past be a part of me without allowing it to define my future. And with Carlos by my side, I am no longer afraid of what lies ahead. The letter was more than just ink on paper. It was a bridge between a hidden past and the uncertain promise of tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, within the fragile threads of that revelation, I will find peace.